Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about working with shadow. And shadow work is a type of psychotherapy or personal growth work that focuses on the shadow self, which are the parts of the psyche that people often keep hidden. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung first developed this concept and used the term shadow self to describe the things that people repress or don't like to acknowledge about themselves. A very easy way to get in touch with our shadow is to consider words like shame or fear and what do they bring up for you if you think about them in yourself. And if you don't think you have any fear or shame, then your shadow is probably really unconscious. And the shadow isn't always that easy to get to because we have this ego or personality self that's very invested in trying to make things look good on the outside, be acceptable, lovable, successful, empowered. Part of us that wants to be good or maybe even better than other people. And ego and shadow, if we look at them as opposite sides of the same coin or as like the beautiful twisted halves of the yin-yang symbol, could be seen as the duality of the human psyche. And discovering the relationship between our ego and our shadow and how they express themselves in our life can really show us where we're functional and dysfunctional and where we need to grow and mature at any given time. Now, because the shadow is composed of parts of ourselves that we reject or fear or shame, we're often blind to them because we want to be. We don't want anybody else to see them either. And a lot of the formation of shadow starts in childhood. So when we're young, at least this is the Jungian theory, we depend on our parents or caregivers for survival. And as a result, we become very attached to them, obviously, and their way of doing things. And so, say a caretaker scolds you for being outspoken. There's a chance you won't feel safe speaking your mind from that point on, even as an adult. And because children's survival depends upon the care of their caregivers, children adapt themselves, even infants adapt themselves to try to be lovable, acceptable, and to be part of the system. Humans are social creatures, and we have a natural ability or even a need to attune our energy and resonance to those that are around us. Now, there's a lot of complexity with parent-child or caregiver-child dynamics, and it's unique to each circumstance, so it can go a lot of different ways. But infants, babies, and small children attune to their caregivers for survival, and they internalize the direction that they get about what's acceptable and unacceptable. Because they need the love and acceptance of their caregivers to survive, the equation is, you won't love me if I do this thing. Or don't do this thing, whatever is expected or not expected. And that gets internalized and buried in the subconscious and can become a whole way of being without our even knowing it. Now, the direct route to your own shadow would be to sit and contemplate or write about or discuss with another person your own deepest fears, shame, regrets, and guilt. That's a good list, huh? Write a list of all the people you're angry at or have resentment against, and any sexual behavior you'd rather not have anybody know about. All those secrets of thought, action, and feeling we'd rather keep just way down buried in the basement, thank you very much. Just keep everybody upstairs where things are nice and neat and orderly, or at least the way we want to present them to others. Because the deeper belief, and I'll say the lie, is if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. And this is why shadow work is so important, because although certainly we hide and keep secret many things about ourselves that are lower resonance, our jealousies, our hatreds, our deep insecurities, our sexual kinks or perversions. We think if anybody saw those things, they would judge them the same way that we do, and many people might. But mixed in with all of that darkness is a lot of unexpressed light. In fact, darkness is the absence of light. And when we can bring our flashlights down into the basement of our own psyche, we will always discover incredible treasure and authentic life energy mixed in with all that garbage we'd rather not look at. And garbage is such a perfect metaphor for this kind of personal growth work. Because if we just take garbage and put it in a box or a bag downstairs in the dark, it will rot and putrefy. And if we bring it out into the sunlight, mix it with the earth, work with it and turn it, give it air and some other organic matter, it will turn into the richest compost. And that, for me, is what the best personal growth work is about. My spiritual psychology work with clients is primarily shadow work. And shadow work is actually about expanding our capacity to hold authentic and high resonance light, to grow and evolve and mature these underdeveloped or dysfunctional and wounded aspects of ourselves has been my most rewarding work in my life, with myself and with others. But it's not easy to see what we don't want to see. And most of our religious, social, and even spiritual practices encourage us, reward us even, for reinforcing our egos and keeping all that shame, guilt, hatred, and kinky sexuality down in the dungeon. But we can't get away from what's true, and on the ultimate level, there are no secrets. And this is where the grace of God comes in. I was listening to the wonderful and wise Catholic priest Richard Rohr recently talk about how most religion turns away from the grace of God, reinforces our self-righteousness, separates us from the parts of ourself that most need healing. And that true religion, true spiritual experience is about healing and transformation. The grace of God is that alchemical energy that turns that garbage into compost. And so to truly experience the love of God, we need to bring that garbage to the compost pile, to allow ourselves to be seen, loved, embraced, and transformed. And again, many religious and spiritual traditions discourage that practice on the deepest levels. Now, the Catholic Church does absolutely have the sacrament of confession. In the 12 steps, steps 4 through 9 are about digging into ourselves, revealing the true nature of our character defenses, and making amends to everyone that we've harmed. Judaism has the Day of Atonement. So it's not like this isn't a known practice, but on a practical basis, most people are absolutely terrified and disown the things about themselves that most need to be healed. And when we disown that stuff, it doesn't disappear. Even though we wish it did, where does it go? We project it outward onto others. And this is actually the roots of human evil. And so if you aren't able to access your own shadow information by yourself, and most of us can't, one of the easiest shortcuts is to consider or make a list of all the things that other people do that bug you, frighten you, or make you angry. And even that can be challenging, especially if you were a Christian raised in the idea that you should love everyone and turn the other cheek, owning that you have judgment, self-righteousness, disgust, disappointment, or outrage at the behavior of others. But this is really our work, because God doesn't want us to be perfect. God wants us to be real and vulnerable and loved. And when we're perfect, or trying to be that, we are invulnerable. And when we reveal these parts of ourselves that we most have shame, guilt, or regret about, and we bring that garbage up out of the basement, that is the only way the light, the love, the grace of God can get to it. And this is about dissolving our ego. And it can take tremendous courage. Although suffering and desperation will bring you there as well. I know suffering and desperation have worked really well for me. As motivators, this is the gift of pain, makes us willing to do things that we wouldn't normally be willing to do. And that pain may be depression, anxiety, maybe a physical illness, a loss, or a life change. And the way we've been managing things, keeping all that shadow stuff down in the dungeon, doesn't work anymore. I like the idea that my ego is not my amigo. So when I consider all those things that other people do that trigger me, irritate me, annoy me, or downright piss me off, there's an old saying that when I'm pointing my finger at someone else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at me. And Jesus talks about this in Matthew 7:5. Thou hypocrite, First, cast out the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to cast the dirt out of your brother's eye. And wherever we judge, reject, or cast out others, that is information about ourselves. Because on the ultimate level, we are all connected. We are all tiny aspects of God. And that includes us as well, because lots of people, this tends to be more of a woman thing, but men do it too, are excellent at loving everybody else and hating, rejecting, or neglecting themselves. Again, the golden rule of Christianity: to love God, love others as you love yourself. And on that triangle of loving God, or loving life, loving others, and loving ourselves, most of us are challenged by at least one of those triangle points, if not all three. I know for myself, it remains easier for me to love and forgive and have compassion for others than it is for me to turn that same energy onto myself. Now, some people have the opposite and have tremendous egos and self-satisfaction and have difficulty extending goodwill to others. And it's very, very common nowadays to not believe in God. And the idea that there are higher, greater, even infinite levels of wisdom, love, and creativity that we can trust and rely upon, that we don't need to be afraid of the end of the world or the demise of humanity. Doesn't mean we don't need to take care of the environment, do our shadow work as a species with how we manage our resources and our garbage, but we have lost access and faith to the infinite alchemical love and expression, the transformative aspects of this greater reality. As a society, we have lost our faith in the abject grace of God that is always available to us. And you can just look at the news, and even a lot of modern spiritual teachers are promoting this kind of generalized angst and fear that we're all going to hell in a handbasket, whatever that means. And our collective ego, just like our individual ego, knows that our willpower alone is not enough. And all of those things we're afraid of: global warming, overpopulation, institutional racism, greed, mental illness, addiction, the disproportionate distribution of wealth. All these fears are our collective shadow. And so there's our individual shadow work, and we can be really distracted from that by this collective shadow that most of us are really afraid of and wishing other people would do their work. Maybe take a look at where you judge, hate, or fear other people who have different viewpoints than you. Viewpoints that you consider wrong or dangerous, ignorant or destructive. It's very common for people who are progressive liberals to actually hate people with fundamentalist or rigid conservative viewpoints. People who might be racist or misogynistic, homophobic, or anti-science. And if we look deeply, the energy of that hatred of those people who are hating is a very similar energy, self-justified in a very similar way. Not easy to look at, but worth a peek. And doing shadow work, going deeply into our own basements and dredging up that which we would rather not see about ourselves, what we often project onto others, and bringing it out into the light is a deeply healing and transformative process. And taking responsibility for the projections that we make onto others of our own disowned shadow, whether we do that as individuals, as families, as religions, as countries in global politics, the courage and integrity that it takes to do that shadow work actually elevates the resonance of all of humanity. And it allows for the dissolution of oppressive systems like slavery, apartheid, makes room for religious freedom and individual sexual expression, and expands the possibilities for each of us to express our most authentic self in the world, and for others to do the same. And as we experience the grace and humility of owning, accepting, coming to compassion, and maturing our own ignorance and limitations and fears, we not only experience the alchemical composting, enriching process of the light, we become portals of light ourselves. And so I encourage you to find the courage and resources to do your own shadow work. Allow your ego to be deflated so that your true self may shine forth under the grace of God. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like some help with your own shadow work, I have some openings in my practice. Send me an email and we can set up a free 30-minute consultation to see if a block of spiritual psychology work might benefit you in your life. info@reneemckenna.com. Check out my Insight Timer profile. There's a link in the show notes. Doing free workshops every week on Insight Timer, a wonderful free app with lots of resources for personal growth and meditation. I'm also taking pre-applications for my year-long mentorship program in spiritual psychology, which will start next September. If you're a therapist or healer or just want to have more direction and clarity in how you can be a force of positive change in the world in your own unique way, I'm here to help and support you along that path. Thanks as always to my generous supporters on Patreon and through this podcast. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.